Hi, I'm James Aitken. This video will introduce you to the techniques of laser cutting, which can be used to produce buildings and other things useful to your model railway layout, such as wagons. Here is an example of the type of building that could be built on a laser cutter. This is a goods shed, modelled on the one at Ilfracombe. The actual model is about 700mm long, so even that is somewhat larger than the laser cutter that I had available, and the sides had to be cut in two pieces and joined. The windows, the glazing, all of the parts were all made on the laser cutter. Here is the engine shed on Ilfracombe. Once again, cut on the laser cutter from MDF for the sides in different layers. The walls are scribed, as you can see. All the blockwork is visible. The windows cut from fairly thin Romark, which is a white plastic suitable for the laser cutter, sandwiched with acrylic sheet for the windows. Once again, that's a pretty big shed. Another use of the laser cutter is in wagon production. These two Diagram 1380 Southern Railway wagons were entirely made on the laser cutter. Sides, all the strapping, the riveting, the chassis, all of the brake gear were all made on the laser cutter. These wagons look absolutely their part compared to the standard production. These are Slater's wagons. There are some Parkside ones mixed in amongst them. But you can very cheaply make up quite a long train. Here is another vehicle. It's a Southern Railway standard van with uneven planking. And once again, sides, doors, strapping, brake gear and underframe entirely produced on the laser cutter. Three-dimensional parts such as the roof, the buffer heads, the axle boxes and the brake shoes themselves, they were 3D printed. Finally, the Southern Railway crocodile. This once again produced on the laser cutter, apart from the bogies, all the sides, the beams across the centre, all laser cut. In this case the buffers came from Parkside. They're the same ones as they fit to their fans. So here I'm going to demonstrate quickly drawing the side of a hut. The hut is going to be brick built using a simple stretcher bond. First thing to do is to draw a rectangle which defines the overall size of the building. And it is well worthwhile working out before you start and writing down on a piece of paper the overall sizes of the building you're going to produce. So now we have drawn a simple rectangle which is the outline of the side. The next thing to do is to start drawing the horizontal mortar courses. And for that we need a line which will be drawn slightly up from the bottom line of the side. So here in 7mm bricks are 1.75mm high, and they run horizontally across the building. Okay, so there we have at the bottom of the screen the first line. With a laser cutter, what you need to do is things like mortar courses are scribed on the material, not cut through, whereas the overall white line round the outside is a cut through. So in order to do that, we define different layers. Each layer has a different colour, and that makes it very clear what you are looking at on the drawing. So having defined horizontal mortar course as being a red line, that first line is now drawn red. We can select that line, and when we do, we can then make copies of that line up the side. That uses a command called array. Array allows us to have a number of rows, so we can have 14 rows, in this case in one column, and the distance apart of the rows is the single brick, 1.75 millimeters. Preview allows us to see whether we've in fact got this right or wrong, and in this case I haven't got enough. So let's change the number of rows to 28 and then preview it. Once again, I've got one too many, but it's easier to accept that and remove the erroneous top one. Okay, so we've got our rows of mortar courses. The next thing to do is to drop in our vertical mortar courses. Once again, we use line and we define the start position of that line and the finish position of that line. You can hear me typing in the two coordinates, the start and end coordinate of that line. Okay, zooming in, we can see that we've got a vertical line, and once again we choose a colour that I've already defined to be for vertical mortar course, and that's green. What I now want to do is copy that line into the row above, but this time in a slightly different position. So I'm going to use the copy command to move that half a brick in width, 2.62 millimeters, and up by a brick height. So I've now got two half brick mortar courses in the right place. I can then go back, selecting those two lines, I can then go back to my array command, and very quickly I can complete all the required brickwork. In this case I have half as many rows because each row is double. This time I also have 14 bricks across. The row's distance is 3.5 millimeters, and each column is the width of a brick, 5.24 millimeters wide. Once again, preview shows me that I've got the right pattern. I accept that, and that job is done. One thing this will do is it'll put some extra green lines on the outside there where I don't want them. It's very easy to remove those. So I have now completed very quickly the drawing of my brickwork on the side of the building. Using the same technique, I can now draw the other sides of the hut. One side has a window, in the end there is a door, and above the window and door there are lintels. Just a plain bit of material with the edges defined by the mortar courses. The next step is to export this drawing in the format that the laser cutter understands. That format is called DXF. DXF is Drawing Exchange Format. So I've now exported that file in DXF form. Moving on to the laser cutter itself, the special software that runs, Laser Cut, requires me to import that drawing and there it is. So that's brought in the sides of the drawing And also in the top right hand corner of the screen you can see a list of the different colours that drawing contains. Each of those is defined as a cut on the laser cutter, but the laser head can move at variable speeds and with variable power. You can change the order in which the colours are done, and essentially the outline, black in this case, needs to be done last. So we move that down. The red lines and green lines are both they are cuts but done at low power and high speed. So the result is that the laser only manages to score the top surface of the material and not cut through. The final cut, however, does need to be cut, and that requires a lower speed of, say, 10 millimeters per second and a higher laser power of, say, 75%. So having adjusted that, the next step is to download that drawing and those settings to the laser cutter itself. This is the laser cutter itself. This particular example has a bed large enough for an A3 size piece of material, and here we can see the head material loaded in place and the ability of the machine to go in X, Y and Z distances. Here we have our parts now cut out by the laser cutter and all the brickwork scribed into position. I've now taken a file to the edges of the MDF. As you can see, they've now been tapered to 45 degrees so that I can bring the corners of the building together with the glue. And there you have it, a very simple brick built hut, all laser cut, a very simple thing to do. And that concludes this video on laser cutting. I hope you enjoyed it.